Good morning, year 3 and 4. I'm just coming back to read some of the next chapter, The Keeper of the Keys, chapter 4. Boom, they knocked again. Dudley jerked awake. Where's the cannon? He said stupidly. There was a crash behind them and Uncle Vernon came skidding into the room. He was holding a rifle in his hand. Now they knew what had been in the long, thin package he'd brought with them. Who's there? He shouted. I warn you, I'm armed. There was a pause. Then, smash, the door was hit with such force that it swung clean off its hinges and with a deafening crash landed flat on the floor. A giant of a man was standing in the doorway. His face was almost completely hidden by a long shaggy mane of hair and wild tangled beard, but you could make out his eyes glinting like black beetles under all of his hair. The giant squeezed his way into the hut, stooping so his head just brushed the ceiling. He bent down, picked up the door and fitted it easily back into the frame. The noise of the storm outside dropped a little. He turned to look at them all. Couldn't make us a cup of tea, could you? It's not been an easy journey. He strode over to the sofa where Dudley had sat, frozen with fear. Budge up, you great lump, said the stranger. Dudley squeaked and ran behind his mother, who was crouching terrified behind Uncle Vernon. Ah, here's Harry, said the giant. Harry looked up to at the fierce, wild, shadowy face and saw the beetle eyes were crinkled with a smile. Last time I saw you, you was only a baby, said the giant. Yeah, look a lot like your dad, but you've got your mum's eyes. Uncle Vernon made a funny rasping noise. I demand you leave at once, sir, he said. You are breaking and entering. Oh, shut up, Dursley, you old prune, said the giant. He reached over the back of the sofa, jerked the gun out of Uncle Vernon's hand, bent it into a knot as easily as if it had been made of rubber, and threw it into the corner of the room. Uncle Vernon made a very funny noise, like a mouse being trodden on. Anyway, Harry, he said the giant, turning his back on the Dursleys, a very happy birthday to you. Got something for you, I have. I might have sat on it at some point, but I'm sure it'll taste all right. From the inside pocket of his black overcoat, he pulled a slightly squashed box. Harry opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a large, sticky chocolate cake with Happy Birthday Harry written on it in icing. Harry looked up at the giant. He meant to say thank you, but the words got lost in his mouth, for what he said instead was, Who are you? The giant chuckled. True, I haven't introduced myself. Rubus Hagrid, Keeper of the Keys and Grounds at Hogwarts. He held out an enormous hand and shook Harry's whole arm. What about that tea then, hey? He said, rubbing his hands together. I'd not say no to something stronger if you've got it, mind. His eyes fell on the empty gate with a shrivelled crisp packet in it, and he snorted. He bent down over the fireplace, then they could see what he was doing. But when he drew back a second later, there was a roaring fire there. He filled the whole damp hut with flickering lights, and Harry felt the warmth wash over him as if he'd sunk into a hot bath. The giant sat back on the sofa, which sagged under his weight, and began taking all sorts of things out of his pocket: a copper kettle, a squashy package of sausages, a poker, a teapot, several chip mugs, and a bottle of some amber liquid which took a swig from before starting to make the tea. Soon the hut was full of sound and smell and sizzling sausage. Nobody said a thing while the giant was working, but he hit the first 6 fat, juicy, slightly burnt sausages from the poker. Dudley fidgeted a little. Uncle Vernon said sharply, Don't touch anything he gives you, Dudley. The giant chuckled darkly. You great pudding of a son don't need fattening any more, Dursley. Don't worry. He passed the sausages to Harry, who was hungry. He'd never tasted anything so wonderful. But he still couldn't take his eyes off this giant. Finally, as nobody seemed about to explain anything, he said, I'm sorry, but I really don't really know who you are. The giant took a gulp of tea and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Call me Hagrid, he said. Everyone does. And, like I told you, I'm Keeper of the Keys at Hogwarts. You'll know all about Hogwarts, of course. No, said Harry. Hagrid looked shocked. Sorry, Harry said quickly. Sorry, barked Hagrid, turning to the dwarves staring at the Dursleys, who shrank back into the shadows. It's them who should be sorry. I knew you weren't getting all your letters, but I never thought You wouldn't know about Hogwarts. Did you never wonder where your parents learnt it all? All what? Asked Harry. All what? Said Hagrid. Just wait 1 second. He leapt to his feet. In his anger, he seemed to fill the whole hut. The Dursleys were cowering against the wall. Do you mean to tell me, he growled at the Dursleys, that this boy knows nothing about anything? Harry thought this was all going a bit far. He had been to school after all, and his marks weren't bad. I know some things, he said. I can, do maths and stuff. But Hagrid simply waved his hand and said, About your world, I mean. Your world, my world, your parents' world. What world? Hagrid looked as if he was about to explode. Dursleys, he boomed. Uncle Vernon had gone very pale, whispered something that sounded like a mimple-wimble. Hagrid stared wildly at Harry. But you must know about your mum and dad, he said. I mean, they're famous. You're famous. What? My mum and dad weren't famous, were they? You don't know. You don't know. Hagrid ran his fingers through his hair, fixing Harry with a bewildered stare. You don't know what you are, he said finally. Uncle Vernon suddenly found his voice. Stop, he commanded. Stop right there, sir. I forbid you to tell the boy anything. A braver man than Vernon Dursley would have quailed under the furious look of Hagrid now gave him. When Hagrid spoke, his every syllable trembled with rage. You never told him what was in the letter Dumbledore left for him. I was there. I saw Dumbledore leave it. Dursley's, and you've kept it from him all these years. Kept what from me? Harry said eagerly. Stop, I forbid you, yelled Uncle Vernon in panic. Aunt Petunia gave a gasp of horror. Ugh, go boil your heads, both of you, said Hagrid. Harry, you're a wizard. There was silence in the hut. Only the sea and the whistling wind could be heard. I'm a what? Gasped Harry. A wizard, of course, said Hagrid, sitting back down on the sofa, which groaned and sank even lower. And a thumping good one, I'd say, once you've been trained up. With a mum and dad like yours, what else could you be? And I reckon it's about time you read your letter. Harry stretched out his hand at last to take the yellowish envelope addressed in emerald green to Mr. H. Potter, hut on the rock, the sea. He pulled the letter out and read, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have a place at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. The term begins on the 1st of September. We await your owl by no later than the 31st of July. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Questions exploded inside Harry's head like fireworks, and he couldn't decide which to ask first. After a few minutes he stammered, What does it mean, they await my owl? Galloping Gordons, that reminds me, said Hagrid, clapping his hand to his forehead with enough force to knock over a cart and horse. And from yet another pocket in his overcoat he pulled out an owl. A real, live, rather fluffed-up-looking owl, a long quill and a roll of parchment. With his tongue between his teeth, he scribbled a note which Harry could only read upside down. Dear Mr. Dumbledore, given Harry his letter, taking him to buy things tomorrow. Weather's horrible. Hope you're well. Hagrid. Hagrid rolled up the note and gave it to the owl, which clamped it to his beak, went to the door, and threw the owl out into the storm. Then he came back and sat down as if this was quite normal, as if he'd just been on the telephone. Harry realised his mouth was open and closed it quite quickly. Where was I? Said Hagrid, but at that moment Uncle Vernon, still ashen-faced but looking very angry, and moved into the firelight. He's not going, he said. Hagrid grunted. I'd like to see a great muggle like you stop him, he said. A what? Said Harry, interested. A muggle, said Hagrid. It's what we call non-magic folk. Like them. And it's your bad luck you grew up in a family of the biggest muggles I've ever laid eyes on. We swore when we took him in, we'd put a stop to all that rubbish, said Uncle Vernon. Swore we'd stamp it out of him. Wizard indeed. You knew, said Harry. You knew. I'm a wizard. Knew? Shrieked Aunt Petunia suddenly. Knew? Of course we knew. How could we not? My sister being what she was. Oh, she got a letter just like that and disappeared off to that school. and came home every holiday with a pocket full of frog spawn, turning teacups into rats. I was the only one who saw her for what she was, a bit of a freak. But for my mother and father, oh no, it was Lily this and Lily that. They were proud of having a witch in the family. She stopped to draw breath and then went ranting on. It seems she'd been wanting to say this for years. Then she met Potter at school, and they'd left and got married and had you. And of course, I knew you'd be just the same, just as strange, just as abnormal, just then. And then, if you please, she went and got herself, you know, what happened, and we all got landed with you. Harry went a little white. As soon as he found his voice, he said, "What happened? You told me they died in a car crash." "Car crash!" roared Hagrid, jumping so angrily the Dursleys scuttled back into the corner. "How could a car crash kill Lily and James Potter? It's an outrage, a scandal. Harry Potter not knowing his own story when every kid in the world knows his name." "But why? What happened?" Harry asked urgently. The anger faded from Hagrid's face. He looked very anxious. "I never expected this," he said in a low, worried voice. "I had no idea when Dumbledore told me that there might be trouble getting hold of you, of how much you didn't know. Oh, Harry, I don't know if I'm the right person to tell you, but someone's got to. Yeah, can't go off to Hogwarts not knowing." He threw a dirty look at the Dursleys. "Well, it's best you know, and I'll tell you as much as I can. Mind, I can't tell you everything. It's a great mystery, parts of it." He sat down, stared into the fire for a few seconds, and then said, "It begins, I suppose, with a person called... But it's incredible, yet I don't know his name. Everyone in the world knows. Who? Well, I don't like saying the name if I can help it. No one does." "Why not?" "Galloping gargoyles. Harry, people are still scared. Blimey, this is difficult. See, there was this wizard who went bad, as bad as you could go. Worse than worse. His name was, Hagrid gulped, but no words came out. "Could you write it down?" Harry suggested. "No, I can't spell it." "All right, Voldemort." Hagrid shuddered. "Don't make me say it again. Anyway, this wizard about 20 years ago started looking for followers, and got them too. Some were afraid. Some just wanted a bit of power, because he was getting himself power. All right. Dark days, Harry. Didn't know who to trust. Didn't dare get friendly with strange wizards or wizards. Terrible things happened. And he was taking over. Of course, some stood up to him. And he killed them, horribly. One of the safest places left was Hogwarts. I reckon Dumbledore's the only one you know who was afraid of. Didn't dare try taking the school, not just then anyway. Now, your mum and dad were good a witch and wizard as I ever knew. Head boy and girl at Hogwarts in their day. I suppose the mystery is why you know who never tried to get them on side before. Probably knew they were too close to Dumbledore to want anything to do with the dark side. Maybe he thought he could persuade them. Maybe he just wanted them out the way. All anyone knows is he turned up in the village where you were living on Halloween 10 years ago. You were just a year old. Came to your house and..." Hagrid suddenly pulled out a very dirty spotted handkerchief, blew his nose like a foghorn. "Sorry," he said, "but it's that sad. Knew your mum and dad, and nicer people you couldn't find. Anyway, you know who killed them. And then, this is the real mystery. He tried to kill you too. Wanted to make a clean job of it, I suppose. Or maybe he just liked killing by then. But he couldn't do it. Never wondered how you got that scar on your forehead. That's no ordinary cut. That's what you get from powerful, evil curses touch you. Took care of your mum and dad and your house even. But it didn't work on you. And that's why you're famous, Harry. No one ever lived after he decided to kill them. No one except you." And we're going to stop there for today. We'll finish off tomorrow. Bye.